Aloha, I'm Chief Master Sergeant Sandra Fox, the Hawaii National Guard Command Senior SID Leader. And today I have with me my co-host, Jeff Hickman, Director of Public Affairs, and I have Andy Jackson, who's behind the scenes, the man of many talents.
Welcome to the State of Hawaii DoD's podcast called Nakoa Exchange, Boots, Wings, and More. This is our first venture into podcasting, so we got to learn a lot on this path. And we got to feature on our first series, the Chiefs 9 with Chief Fox. So thank you for letting us do the guinea pig with you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for this support. So today we're going to reflect on previous episodes of the Chiefs 9, and we're going to talk about some of our highlights, some of our favorite things we probably could do better, maybe some learning lessons. But we hope you guys enjoy this episode today.
Okay, so Chief, we have 9 episodes and kind of an intro. What are your overall thoughts, and what did you experience going through the recording of the Chiefs 9?
Yeah, I think initially apprehensive about this idea. I thought this is a big idea. What are we going to do with it? Podcasts are hit or miss. Some people might listen to it, some might not. And I think just going through this whole process, the creative process, was a great way to learn a lot about some of our airmen and soldiers that we featured. And I'm just really ecstatic that we were able to do this and to reflect back and just kind of learn about all the great things that our airmen and soldiers are doing.
We've been wanting to do a podcast for a very long time. We see other states that did it, and we're like, I think we can do that. And I know we have the great stories. I think some of you mentioned the guests were just amazing, and the experience going through it. At first, I thought went a little long, and we were a little bumbling in the beginning, but oh my God, we got better, and then we were able to pull great stories from our great guests, and so that's what I experienced. So I also thank you again for allowing us to do this, and we will be better in the future. And as if you watch the episodes, you can see we do get stronger as we go along. Did you feel that way too?
Yeah, I agree. I think initially it was like, who are we going to feature? That was kind of one of our first, I would say obstacle, but kind of questioning it. So first we started with coming up with our 9 topics.
Right.
Then we were like, okay, now who we're going to feature, who we're going to have talk. So I actually reached out just through different people, talking with you guys. Hey, who do you guys know in the harangue and hyang that might be good to talk about this? And amazingly enough, the way the pairings came together was sort of like magic. And it was amazing when they spoke. You're like, wait a minute, have you guys ever met each other? They're like, no. They were riffing back and forth with one another. Their connections were just really strong. And so a lot of people ask, how do I get on the show? And I'm like, it was just a recommendation, and I'm just going to trust whoever I'm asking for that recommendation. And it just worked out really great.
Most of the people said yes. And I remember we started off with lists. So we did Year 9 first, which is a great slideshow as well, along with the logo, and just to have your principles and initiatives. And then the list of people, and there were a lot of empty spaces after our initial 3 or 4. We were just thinking, what are we going to do? And there was a little bit of pressure there, but again, it always comes through, right? When there's hard missions to do and you come into obstacles and challenges, the National Guard will always find a way, and they deliver. You have incredible guests on these episodes. So, what did you learn from these episodes?
I learned that a lot of people want to share. Like, they are willing to talk about the things that you are asking of them, right? So what's your opinion on A, B, and C? And they just want to share their story. They're very proud members to be in the National Guard. They just show a lot of pride. They're very proud. And I think just it takes me back to why I serve, listening to them and how they're expressing their views. And it was just all great, just to really sit and it was like a mentoring session, a mini mentoring session every time we met with an airman and soldier. So I just learned a lot about a lot. What about yourself?
I would say it was I like that. It was a counseling session. It was a learning session. And if I knew some of the content that our guests shared as leaders and mentors and what they do to be successful, I think I would have been way more successful in my efforts. I did my time, I'm done, and now I'm like, wow, I have more knowledge now than I did when I was in because of our guests and this whole episode. And we want to save all of that content. It's always going to be there. But yeah, what did I learn from the episode? I learned a lot of everything, Army, Air, and leadership.
Well, it got me thinking, how do we hone in on some of this experience? How can we leverage these the things that our people are thinking, because usually at our levels, right? It's our level. It's E9 and above. We have the opportunity to speak, but like, how do we leverage these people in these positions that may not be in, like, I would say, higher leadership roles, but
Yeah, and the topics with the people, I think some of them could have switched, but the ones that actually stayed with the topic that we had worked out. And to be able to hear their stories that were very significant and specific to that topic worked. Now, I think a couple of them could have been on 3 episodes because they were so interesting and had a wealth of experience. And I hope that that does get shared with the lower enlisted. And I do hope that the lower enlisted realizes that a lot of these guys, where they started was not where they finished. They were one and dones, barely joined the guard. A lot of the things were lucky that how it got to them to their place that they're at now. So it'll let the lower enlisted know that, if you're just a drill status now and you're E3, E4, E5, you can still do a lot more. And these guys, all of them were examples.
yeah. And hopefully, like, with those people being on our podcast or episode, that they can be mentors to those out there listening. So, that was the hope and the purpose for this podcast.
Oh, yes.
Was like, talk story,
That was.
figure out what mentoring you have or you can offer, and yeah.
I think that's what we told all of them, right? It's a talk story session. There'd be 4 of us around this table. No, just look at us and talk. And forget the cameras and the lights and just tell us your story. And they did. They came through. I do think we did a little bit of work to get some information there. So the first 3 episodes were our introduction, our warrior ethos, and leadership spectrum. And so we had Chief Hubbard and Command Sergeant Major Kumalai on warrior ethos, and our leadership spectrum had Staff Sergeant Alcala and Senior Master Sergeant Barrientos. So I guess, what are your thoughts and your memories from those first 3 episodes?
Intro was a little scary. It was like if you come back here right now, you're going to see all these bright lights, these cameras, these really nice microphones. So it was kind of like I'm being interviewed, right? Like, why am I doing this? And I just had to really be like, all right, I'm just going to be honest and be genuine with why I want this podcast to happen. And it definitely came to fruition on what that was. For Warrior Ethos, I felt like it was a very formal episode in terms of, like, when you actually say warrior ethos, they were really actually like warrior mindset. Like, I'm just going to give you this information. But what I really enjoyed was some of their examples that they were providing, like the Mike Tyson comment. And there was just all these things. And I had to, like,
They
write
quoted
that down.
Greeks to Mike Tyson.
Yeah, so I
yes.
thought that was kind of cool to compare that in leadership roles. And then just learning about how the Air Force and the Army view warrior ethos. It's the same, but the way they go about it was interesting. But they both agreed that we can do better at having a more of a warrior ethos mindset, and that, that's probably a challenge that we have in our components.
I did like too when we tried to get Army and Air because we wanted to have 2 guests on every episode. I'm Army, you're Air, so it was a good mix. But a lot of the topics and problems and challenges and successes were the same. The principles that the Air Force has compared to the leadership's ideals and lists and mantras that the Army has, they're very similar. And I guess both of those leaders, and they were true warrior leaders, wanted to really pound that home and make sure the lower enlisted know that, hey, you're a warrior first, and then you do everything else. So it's, the 2 missions of the Guard: support your communities and win America's wars. And they pounded on the win the America's wars part a lot.
Agree. One of the feedback they gave me was, man, I wrote all this stuff down on my papers. There was all these things I wanted to say, but didn't get a chance to say it. So I was like, hey, this just opens up more conversation with your soldiers and airmen about, the topic in itself. So a lot of information for that. As far as leadership spectrum, so Andy actually came up with that title because we were talking about different leadership styles. Is kind of how it came up, and we said spectrum. Oh, that's so broad. Like, how do we pinpoint what we want to talk about? And it actually, the topics that came up were just very simplified and just between the 2 people talking about everything. I think we talked about emotional intelligence, effective communication. I think we're the 2, and that one was kind of a longer discussion. There's just so much to cover, but it was great. Yeah.
I envisioned these episodes, talking about from the intro. My mindset was 10 to 12 minutes. We're going to keep it short, but we did that first one, and Andy holds up signs in the back, and he can show you right now what he holds up that we see for the different time hacks, and he put up 10 so quick, and 20 came up right away, but the topics were there. And so I went from an expectation of short, digestible interviews, talk story sessions, and they expanded to counseling sessions and I think resources that can be used later with lower enlisted, senior, and even leaders to watch and hear what your troops are talking about. And this is kind of what they believe in. You know, the leadership spectrum, the warrior ethos, and some of the other ones, communication seemed to be a theme throughout. And so that seems like a challenge that if you can overcome that, you might be able to do a lot of these other things. So we had those great guests for Warrior Ethos. And so Warrior Ethos was our first guest, and that was our first real episode with people. Were you nervous about not getting enough information from them before we started? Because I know it dissipated in the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I think it was how do you create momentum and conversation to keep it going that's also going to be insightful, relevant, and interesting. But I feel like once we warmed up and we kind of forgot that the cameras were there, then we were able to get into some deeper discussion. And you, Jeff, is just great at bridging and just making sure like conversation continues to flow. I think at one point we were probably like, hey, you guys can probably what do we say, land the plane, you know, because I agree. I think initially you were thinking 10 to 12 minutes on the length, but a lot of people wanted more than 30 minutes, more than 40 minutes, maybe even up to 1 hour. So this is a lot of good
Yeah,
content.
they could have gone for a really
Oh
long
yeah.
time. Yeah, once we started the content, that was not a problem at all, pulling that down. All right, so we go to episodes 4, 5, and 6. So resilience with Sergeant First Class Mateo and Tech Sergeant Data. Guard Story with Staff Sergeant Sager and Senior Airman Murch. And then Emotional Intelligence with Command Sergeant Major Stimson and Chief Misty Park. So these are some deep episodes. What was out of those three? Any big moments from those that you remember?
I
I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah, I don't know, those honestly, when we kind of went over those topics, I didn't really think I don't say much about it, but I wasn't sure, right? But just hearing so for Brazilians, just having them share their challenges that they overcame and how they bounced back. I was like, man, that's amazing. The guard story. I was like blown away. I think that's probably my most favorite, to be honest with you, because it was just so pure in the experiences of being in the guard. And emotional intelligence was just, it's just something we always should talk about, right? And learning how people navigate through communication and relationships. So it's hard to pick, I guess, which one I learned the most from, but those probably are my top three favorite, ones that I got a lot out of
During
with my
resilience,
guests.
I didn't know the level of detail they would share, and they went deep. They went to some very personal things that happened to them
Yeah.
and how they overcame it. And I thought that was a great message. This is where they were. This is what happened, and this is how they succeeded. And they tell you how. So they're laying a groundwork for everybody else. And resilience is all about coming back, and they did it. And you made a really good point. I wrote it down when you told people, and this is a good mantra for everybody, is that when you're on leave, you're on leave. When you're done with work, you can have your cell phones for emergencies, but you're done. Spend time with your family. And so there's the work life and the civilian life. And I thought being in the Guard, we got to share a lot of that in all of the different topics, the civilian versus military, and also how to apply some of the things you learned in the military to your personal life.
Yeah, and like your relationships, right, with your kids, your spouse. Yeah, and I just thought the resilience, just how they stay grounded, like what they learned and how they stay grounded. And like now they encourage people to ask for help, check on your airmen, check on your soldiers, and what grounds you.
And
And
we asked them, now that they went through that, are they better suited for when it happens again? And they both said yes.
yeah.
They can, so then now they know how to overcome it. So going through it is the hardest part. They overcame it, and now they'll be able to treat it because it can come up again, and it doesn't have to take you to the same low level, and they can go on. Oh, sorry, go
The
ahead.
examples that they provided of their challenges, one was related to relationships because of deployments and sort of, being available or, being present. Then the other one was like a financial obstacle and how they bounced back from that. So it's like two different, but then challenges that affected their livelihood.
And I think a lot of people would do that, being taken off orders, being on a joint task force on a neighbor island. Thousands of people just recently went through that. We did COVID, we did fire. So that was there. Okay, now the guard story is the topic. And I know you were kind of tentative on that one because in every single episode, we ask people to introduce themselves and say, tell us your guard story. How did you get into the guard? How did you get to the position that you're currently at? Andy's holding up a 15 right now. He's screaming it at us. So the guard story, we ask everybody. And so we got these two individuals who I kind of knew of Sergeant Sager. I had no idea about Senior Airman Murch. But when they sat down and they told their guard story, which was amazing, and they both came into the guard super late in life and had all kinds of obstacles. I mean, you go from being adopted and being from in Eastern Bloc country under Soviet rule. That was their background. That's how they started,
Right.
and it's amazing. And their stories were very touching.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that they were two individuals who joined, like you said, the guard later in life, but like one was like, my American dream is to serve in the military. And then one was sharing, the guard saved my life, and you talk about their history, right? One's a professional tennis player. That's how he left the Soviet, right? And came into the United States and playing professional tennis for Hawaii. Then the other one was something in combat with public affairs or something like that. He was media
The all Army
rugby team, and just kind of like how those paths cross. And it was just funny. I think they're probably lifelong friends now,
Yeah,
just based off that 40-minute discussion, on your story. So
but incredible backgrounds. And again, that's just two people. We say in public affairs all the time, share your guard story. That's how we go get interviews and we prep public affairs professionals. When you go out, go find the guard story. That's what the TAG, National Guard Bureau, Big Army, DOD, they like hearing that and sharing it because it's so different. And emotional intelligence with those two guests, sharing what they do and their personal achievements and awareness and how they apply that to family life. I mean, they seem a lot more organized than I will ever be. But they gave great examples of what to do. And a lot of notes can be taken from that. When Command Sergeant Major Simpson talked about priming, I thought it was a good way to start the day is he thinks about 3 past events, positive things, and then thinks about 3 other people and their situations.
yeah.
So just thinking about those 6 things before you start work and it gets you going and positive, and then it might just be reaching out. There's so many people that I know I owe a text to or I should call or notify, and he has a system in place where he takes care of that, and it was just very impressive.
And I loved he left us with a gift.
Oh,
If you recall, it was a book, the 5 languages or appreciation languages in the workplace. So I took the test, and I actually like words of affirmation, which was an aha moment for me. I never realized that, but it made sense as I kind of reflected back, my career, like what do you look for in validation when it comes to like your performance? And so I thought that was just a great added bonus to teach me more about emotional intelligence. And didn't you mention, Jeff, like you weren't really clear on what emotional intelligence was and you had to sort of look it up?
Well, I Googled it and I had all kinds of notes ready, and it just washed away when they started talking. It was easy for me then to understand exactly what it was, and then that we apply it all the time. It's not just a military thing, but it is its existence. So we've got communications, relationships constantly pop up, civilian and military. So constant themes with all the topics. All right, so that was episodes 4, 5, and 6. So episodes 7, 8, and 9, we had time management and priorities with Senior Master Sergeant Morse and his wife as well, Senior Master Sergeant Morse, Jolene Morse. So that was our first couple that we had on. Episode 8, Lead from the Front and Mentorship with Master Sergeant Makane Ole and Chief Spencer. And then episode 9, we brought back 2 past Cecils. That was our Cecil alumni show, Chief Parker and Chief Lee, to kind of find out what did they think about in the past and their experiences being the Cecil, and we got to also hear their guard story as well. So out of those episodes 7, 8, and 9, what are some thoughts you had from those?
What was kind of funny with time management, it took a long time for me to even get the two together because of their busy schedule. So I thought,
They're
perfect.
popular.
Yeah, more reason why they should be on the show. Learning that their time management is also supported by their unit, because the two are part of the busiest flying units. They're both in the flying unit, but just how their leadership supports them and how they're on their like master calendar. And then we talked about even making time for ourselves as a couple. And so that was a deep discussion about making sure you have date night and that you have your one-on-one time with your spouse, which I think we all can do more of, right? So I thought that was just a great point to make point of, because we definitely have to do that. And it's not all about time management when it comes to like, what's your priorities at work? We're talking all of it, quality of life. Yeah, by
And
yourself.
she made a good point, is that, and it's said over and over, and sometimes you need to just hear it, and where time is precious. If I make time with you, it's because I love you, and I'm dedicated to you or dedicated to the mission. Time is valuable. And then she said, and it got her to tears and almost made me come up with tears, was, you never know when the time will end. So you got to make the time. So the system that they set up, the challenges and the help that they're getting from their units, 2 of the busy flying units, family, and they overcame it, and they seemed like they had everything in order. Now, I know it's probably chaos behind the scenes, and they don't look it, but they're also higher up in the levels, so they've succeeded with all of those challenges, which now are not challenges because it's segmented, it's blocked off.
And just watching them two interact, like I don't know if you guys could see it, on the episode, but just the way they were looking at each other as they were talking, they wanted reassurance from each other, like, oh yeah, like this is a team effort. So I thought that was really cool.
That was great, and she's the smallest airman in the
Yeah, she's the
Air Force.
shortest, I guess, load master.
That is crazy.
And so they used her for a what do you call it? They used her as a study.
Yeah, the example.
A study for can it work?
Can people be this high
Yeah.
and succeed? And not a good one to test if she can succeed, because I think she can succeed at a lot of different things. Leading from the front mentorship was like a no-brainer one that, the topic just seems so easy, but oh my gosh, the stories and examples that they gave. The Army one talked about mentorship, and he had to make sure so he's an NCO, but he not only had to make sure the platoon was set, but he has to look up platoon leader. So is the platoon leader ready, and is he prepared? Because I don't want him to look stupid in front of the men. So that platoon sergeant had a lot of responsibilities, and that can go for any military, any rank, any civilian. Is you take care of the top and the bottom. That makes you a great leader. And they had tons of examples. They named them all too, who their mentor was, and it could have been the person just before, or it could have been multiple people who believed in them when they didn't see their potential. I thought that was a really good message for that. What'd you get from that?
I really like that example from Chief Spencer about the steersman,
Oh, the canoe.
the canoe, and I was like thinking, I did my my second canoe race with you actually, Jeff, and I'm thinking about like that teamwork that's required to get this canoe moving forward. And I was like, oh wow, that example aligns with like how we view leading and mentoring and coaching. So it's just cool ways to just for examples, and you're like, wow, yeah, okay, that's what we're doing here. So I thought it was good.
Staying on that canoe analogy, we had 2 races, and the first one was horrible. And so we even learned from that. So you can learn from systems, and immediately you can make changes. And small changes, just changing somebody's seat, really made a difference in how you do things. So if you can visualize that with your units and your personnel, you can really see it through.
Sorry, I'm laughing extra because of our situation and experience that happened in that canoe with
Yes,
you.
we're not gonna talk about what happened in the canoe, but it was a great experience, and I've paddled canoe in the past, and I loved it. So when he said that analogy, it was like, oh, crystal clear.
Yeah, that
really
makes
got it. bringing back two former command senior enlisted leaders, Chief Parker and Chief Lee, wealth of experience. I think their guard story took 15 minutes. I rewatched it, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of long. They had a lot of Andy shaking his head back there. Yes, we knew them well.
That's the reason why we couldn't keep episodes under 15 minutes, because the guard stories took 15 minutes, almost every episode.
Their experiences and how they got there. And sometimes they would say, I think you even said it, is, oh, I don't recommend going this path, but it doesn't matter what the path is. Just work it out. It'll work. And a lot of, I like, both of them said they appreciated when the tag would give them a seat at the table. So the enlisted had a seat at the table. And did you get to experience that as well? Is that, the CISO represents all the enlisted. Was it good voice, good support?
Yeah, absolutely. General Hara, my previous boss, definitely made sure that I was there, no matter, even if I didn't have a speaking point, just the fact that you're physically there shows something. And hey, this is my CCEL. So it was a command team effort and relationship. And I could see where if you don't have that, how it sort of maybe discredits the position a little bit. So I think that would be the number one, is build that relationship with your boss, your general officer or your commander.
Any level, build it with the boss.
Yeah.
I think Chief Parker also said is that why he was there is because the tag appreciated his frankness, and sometimes you need people around that might have a different opinion than you have because you see things a certain way. So he was getting a different perspective. The tag, Major General Joe Logan at the time, knew that if I have this CISO next to me, he's going to pick up different things, and I can actually look at his face and see whether he liked it or not, but I'm going to ask him later, and he's going to tell me truth. And so having being confident enough to have somebody else that didn't have maybe the same opinion with you. But representing the enlisted has got to be kind of stressful. And so is there one thing you're going to miss about being Cecil?
I think I'm gonna miss just the unit engagements, being there for ceremonies, promotions, just events like, singing the Army and the Air Force song. And I think just getting to know them, like this process in itself, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to do it by not being a CISO in a podcast, so I'm gonna miss just those interactions with our eminent soldiers.
They're definitely going to miss you.
No, thank you.
So the number 9 in the Chiefs 9, but it's actually episode 10, is the Women in Combat. And we brought in 2 superstars for that. What stood out for you the most? I'm sorry, it was Captain Nucky and Captain Burley.
So I think to go over a little bit why I even invited them to come on was I was invited to a female in combat arms sort of meeting, talking about some diversity challenges of that, because women are still fairly new in the combat arms units. And I just didn't realize that challenge that they had. Being me, I'm a personnelist, so like it's a lot of females, and I never thought about how would I feel if I was the only female in a male dominated career field. And just listening to some of their issues. So one thing we really talked about was hygiene and privacy challenges, like when you're going out to the field, the thought like, oh, you're a female, like you can't do certain things, the same things that the males can do. But then the balance of like, you are a female, you do have different needs, and so you probably can't do some of the things that the males can do, and just kind of figuring out where do you fit in. And I just thought it just opened up my mind. I got to get them on. Let's talk about this, because I think this is a subject that everybody should be listening to, because it's about being inclusive and then diversity in it. And I think just looking at the two, and I'm like, man, these are captains, right? Like this is the future. These are our future officers who are in command right now, and as they stay in, become in leadership roles, and they're paving the way. They're breaking certain barriers. They're building this legacy of like, you can do it. You can be a strong soldier, not necessarily female, but like you can do it all. And I don't know, I just really was in awe of them and their experience.
Yeah, they showed that the label of being female went away, and they were just rank and soldier at the time. Now, they were both in a very tough unit. It's not just women in military or women in combat. These were commanders, and the very first for the Hawaii National Guard, and they're in a field artillery unit, which is already very ho-ho and hiki-no. And those soldiers accepted them. They probably tested them a little bit because they needed to find out. They did say a couple times, I got to use my mommy voice for them to understand, because sometimes they don't. And what I heard was the respect was earned. It wasn't given right away, but it was the same that a male would have gone through. And they appreciated what their soldiers did, and they know they're trendsetters and making efforts. I just happen to know a stat that in 1974 there were only 19 women in the Hawaii Guard, and in 2024 we just had 2 female commanders. Now they're working on the staffs, and they're going to progress in their careers. They're not done. No, they made a great milestone and achievement, but they're not done by any means.
And don't get me wrong, we don't want to be identified as, you got picked because you're female. We want to be identified for our abilities and our capabilities and the things that we bring to the table. So that's the balance of talking about first female anything or females in anything, So I just hope it kind of creates some conversations and open dialogue on what are some of the challenges we're having. So yeah, it's really good.
And there's a lot of challenges out there. We're going to have a lot of topics that definitely will be covered.
Awesome.
Okay, so that was the last episode. Do you have any final words that you want to kind of conclude with about the entire series?
I think I'm hopeful that the series has provided some insights that I think normally people wouldn't maybe hear from other people other than myself. I've always told myself I don't want to hear myself talking, and I think the better results is because they know the people that are being featured, and I believe I've heard some people have used it for professional development. And our incoming CSO, Command Sergeant Major Kumalai, plans to continue on with a podcast series.
Great.
His format might be a little bit different, but he'll put his spin on it, which I'm really excited for. But I think there's just a lot more opportunity to get on this podcast, and just talk story. Just so much.
You think you're
to
going to
share.
continue?
I don't know. It might be my full-time job later, but I just had a lot of fun. And I just really with the support of you guys in the PAO office and just, hey, yeah, Chief, that's a great idea. And really pushing me to kind of do it. And it's going to be good. And I was kind of sad when we ended recording. So I'm glad we're doing this last one. But I'm oh man, I was ready to do more. But I think for those of you out there listening, take the time to listen in on these episodes. It's not about me. It's about the soldiers and airmen that we have featured. A lot of great pairs of people that have experience and insights that I think you can definitely learn a lot from. So this is not a senior enlisted leader thing. This is really a Hawaii National Guard, episode or series. So
Or featuring the superstars of the Guard and their stories. Andy had some really good points. I wanted to bring him on and share too. Andy, what did you feel and learn and experience? What are some of your thoughts about going through this Chiefs 9?
It was really interesting the way I listened to the Chief podcast. I actually listened to every episode 4 or 5 times. But there's a connective tissue of themes and readiness and resilience and being mentally prepared before you walk into the room or before a mission hits, and the importance of all of that. And how that helps us to be successful as guardsmen. That you have to take care of your physical, spiritual, and mental health, and and everyone does it differently. And there's all these, whether it works for you or it doesn't, you can take something from one of these episodes and will help you be a more successful and a more proficient airman or soldier. And I think one of the key things is really being able to understand other people and where they're coming from. the whole leadership spectrum and emotional intelligence episode, where being able to understand the feedback you're giving and the noise you're putting in the room, and read the noise that other people are putting in the room so you can have an appropriate response. As someone that is on the spectrum, that is neurodiverse, it's something that is always kind of made me wonder how I function in the world, and it really helped me see different people's perspectives. And I really enjoyed that in all of these things, because while we may have been talking about one topic, it touched on almost all 9. Every episode touched on almost all 9 in one aspect or another.
So true.
Andy told me a couple things while we were preparing for this. Now, Andy had to edit these episodes, so he's seen it and heard it probably about 30 times. He's cutting and over and then uploading, so he's very familiar with it. But he also mentioned that our unplanned synchronicity of the guests. They came into the military at the same time. They both worked at the same location. They, whether it even be Army and Air, they had the same ideas of leadership, and they would feed off each other. They would look at each other and go, "Yeah, he said a really good quote, and I want to go in on that. I might take that to build on that." There was a lot of that interaction, and the diversity of guests. We did keep it. There's a lot of senior, but we had a senior airman on, and we had some E5 level, but it was a good diversity and a good mix. We got from international to prior service to, Command Sergeant Major Kumulai told a story about how he didn't know what to do after high school, and the recruiter said, "What about the Guard?" And he said, "Okay," and that's how we joined. So the stories were just amazing. So I was thinking about it, and I wrote this down. I said, I learned, I met, and I hope. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from all the guests and you in this process. I met amazing people, and I think that some of the ones that are not closer to the end of the career, I'm going to see the other ones progress and finish a long career in the Guard. So I've met, and I will follow a lot of those people. And then I do hope exactly what you said, is that units take advantage of these episodes that will be on forever on the internets, and they can use it for professional development and share, because some of these lessons are timeless. In fact, most of them are timeless. So, and then I just let you know before that we're going to be taking clips and sharing some of the highlights. So if somebody doesn't want to watch or they don't know they want to watch a 25-minute episode on Leadership Spectrum, and then a part 2, is that they'll get to see snippets and highlights of them, and we'll start to break that up so we can share it even more on different mediums. Now, we did go long today, as we did in all the other ones, and we had bonus content, we had extended. So what are the last thoughts to talk about? That is the length and the ending and the bonus content, what you learned in that experience.
I felt like we could have kept going, just keep talking story, and the bonus content was really a nice added surprise. I think it might have been Andy's idea. So when you guys did it, I was like not expecting it. And I think just to learn about, I don't know, what is bonus content, right? And I just made it good fun and lighthearted, and really get to know our speakers a lot more.
And we couldn't deny the audience of the last nuggets that we wanted to share, because you and I would know things and they didn't get to it. Right. And so we're trying to prompt them to get in to say it. So that's why we had to have another 10 minutes of, can you share that story, that particular one? And then we were able to pull it out of them. So I'm glad we didn't deny anybody, even the audience, those pieces of information and stories and history that they shared.
Right. So do you have a pickleball analogy before we end?
I did, and I forgot it. No, yes, I do. Okay, pickleball analogy is be consistent and learn from other people. And so I do that. I'll be playing, I'll watch, and I'll be going, oh, those guys are good. Oh, he did that. Okay, I'm going to try to that. So watching these guys and what they did and listening, this was a counseling session, because we took in what they said and we felt it. We felt their emotions, even though we're in a kind of a sterile location. And if you're just listening, you might not catch that, but we could see the eyes of these people as they shared their story, and they were free to share it. And we're so thankful for that.
Yeah, I am so thankful. So thank you to all of our guests that were featured on the Chiefs Nine. So in closing, like I said, our this will be on the NACOA Exchange Boots, Wings, and More Department of Defense podcast. So feel free to subscribe. It's on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. And with your incoming CSIL Command Sergeant Major Kumalai, go out and support him. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity. So thank you so much for out there listening to us. I'm gonna sign out. Aloha.